What would you do if the only person you loved was in danger and no one came to help? Would you stay silent, or would you fight, even if you were afraid? My name is Marta, and this is the story of the night that changed my life forever. I was only 16 years old, but I still remember every moment as if it happened yesterday. I lived with my mother, Isabel, in a small old apartment near the train tracks. The walls were cracked, the paint was falling, and the roof leaked when it rained. It was not beautiful, but it was our home. My father had left us many years ago, so it was only the two of us. My mother worked long hours in a bakery kitchen. Her hands were rough from kneading dough, and her back hurt from standing all day. But she never complained. She always told me that as long as we had each other, we had enough. I believed her, but sometimes when she thought I was not looking, I saw the sadness in her eyes. Before I continue, I want to ask you something. What would you do in my place? Please tell me in the comments. And if you are enjoying this story, do not forget to subscribe and share. The hardest part of our life was not the hunger or the cold nights. It was our landlord, Mr. Grayson. He was a large man with a heavy voice that made my heart beat faster every time he came near. He collected the rent every week, and if my mother was even one day late, he shouted at her in the hallway so that all the neighbors could hear her. I hated the way he looked at her. His eyes made me feel sick, as if he was thinking things he should not. My mother always told me not to answer him, not to make him angry, but I could not hide the anger inside me. One Tuesday afternoon, I came home from school and knew something was wrong the moment I stepped into the street. The door of our apartment was closed, but I could hear voices inside. I stopped and listened. Mr. Grayson was shouting. His words were rough and sharp. He wanted the rent again. My mother's voice sounded smaller, weaker, as she begged him to wait a little longer. Then I heard a crash, maybe a chair falling, maybe a cup breaking. My stomach tightened. I dropped my school bag and ran to the door, pulling at the handle, but it was locked. I pressed my ear against the wood and heard my mother cry out. She told him to stop, to leave her alone. My hands shook as I banged on the door, shouting for him to open it. No one answered. I felt tears fill my eyes. I could not stay outside. Then I remembered the small window at the back of the apartment. It was old and sometimes left a little open for air. I ran around the building, climbed onto a broken stool, and pushed the window up with all my strength. Somehow, I pulled myself inside, and what I saw made my blood turn cold. Mr. Grayson was holding my mother by her arm. His face was red with anger, and he was laughing. My mother's dress was torn at the shoulder, and she was trying to push him away. She looked terrified, but he was stronger. Without thinking, I shouted at him to let her go. He turned his head and looked at me. His eyes were dark and full of rage. He told me to leave, to stay out of it. I felt something burning inside me. I could not leave. I picked up a piece of broken wood from the floor and hit him across the back with all my strength. He turned quickly and slapped me hard across the face. I fell to the ground, my cheek burning from the pain. My mother screamed my name. Mr. Grayson pointed his finger at me, shouting again for me to stay out of it. But I could not. I was not strong, but I had to protect her. I reached into my school bag, which I had dropped inside, and pulled out a small kitchen knife I had been using for a school project. It was not sharp, but in that moment, it was the only thing I had. My hands shook, but I stood up and shouted at him to move away from my mother. My mother cried for me to stop, but I could not hear her voice. My heart was too loud. Mr. Grayson took a step toward her, and I rushed forward without thinking. I wanted to scare him, to make him stop. My hand hit his side, and then everything slowed down. For a second, I did not understand what had happened. Then I saw the blood. Dark red spread across his shirt. He shouted in pain and fell to the ground, holding his side. My knife dropped from my hand. I stood frozen, unable to breathe. My mother grabbed me and pulled me close. Her hands were shaking, but she tried to stay calm. She told me it would be all right, but her eyes were wide with fear. She ran to the phone and called for help. I sat on the floor, my hands covered in blood, crying that I had not meant to do it. I only wanted to protect her. The sound of sirens came quickly. Neighbors gathered outside, whispering and pointing at our window. When the ambulance arrived, 2 men came in with a stretcher. They lifted Mr. Grayson, his face pale and his shirt soaked in blood. He groaned in pain but was still alive. Soon after, the police arrived. They looked around the room and saw the knife on the floor. One of them asked who had done it. My mother held my hand tightly and said it was me, but that I had not wanted to hurt anyone. The police took us to the station. I was shaking all the way, afraid they would put me in jail. I was only a girl, and I did not want to be a criminal. At the station, a kind officer spoke gently to my mother. He said he understood what had happened. He said I was protecting her, but the law still had to be followed. We had to explain everything to the judge. My mother nodded, but she looked exhausted. Her face was pale, and her eyes were full of tears. That night, they gave us a small room with a bed and a chair. My mother held me in her arms, and we both cried until we had no tears left. I knew nothing would ever be the same again. The next morning came too fast. I had barely slept. My head felt heavy, and my eyes burned from all the crying. My mother, Isabel, tried to be strong, but I could see her hands trembling when she fixed my hair with an old comb. We were waiting in the small room at the police station until someone came to take us to the court. I kept asking myself the same question again and again. What will happen to me now? When the officer finally arrived, he told us we had to go. I held my mother's hand tightly as we walked down the hall. People looked at us, some with pity, others with judgment. I felt smaller with every step. I wanted to disappear, but I could not. I had to face what I had done. Outside, the air was cold, and the gray sky made everything feel heavier. They put us in a car and drove us to the courthouse. My heart beat so loudly that I thought everyone could hear it. The courthouse was big, with tall walls and heavy doors. Inside, the air smelled of paper and old wood. A woman introduced herself as our lawyer. She was short, with kind eyes and a calm voice. She told my mother not to worry, that she would explain everything to the judge. She also said that Mr. Grayson was alive, though weak and in the hospital. Hearing that gave me a small bit of relief, but the guilt still sat like a stone in my stomach. I never wanted to kill him. I only wanted to save my mother. When we entered the courtroom, I felt dizzy. The judge sat at the front, wearing glasses and looking serious. People whispered as we walked in. I sat next to my mother and held her hand as if it was the only thing keeping me alive. The lawyer stood and explained our story. She said that my mother was attacked and I tried to protect her. She said I was only a girl and I had acted out of fear. I listened to her words, but I was too nervous to believe they would help. Then the judge asked me to stand. My knees shook as I rose. He looked at me for a long time, his eyes calm but deep. He asked me what had happened. My voice trembled, but I told him everything. I told him how I heard my mother cry, how I climbed through the window, and how I only wanted Mr. Grayson to stop. I told him I did not want to hurt him, but it all went too fast. I spoke with tears running down my cheeks. The room was silent when I finished. The judge leaned back in his chair and stayed quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Marta, you are young, and you acted out of fear and love. You were protecting your mother, but you must remember, hurting someone is never the right way. Violence brings more pain, and it could have ended worse. You must learn from this." His voice was firm but not cruel. Then he turned to my mother and said that we would not be punished with prison. Instead, we needed guidance and help. Relief washed over me, but it did not last long. The judge also said we could not go back to our apartment. Mr. Grayson had already reported that he did not want us there anymore. My mother nodded without arguing. She did not want to see his face again, and neither did I. Still, I felt fear in my chest. Where would we go now? After the court, the lawyer arranged for us to stay in a women's shelter. It was a small building with several rooms, filled with other women and children who had also escaped painful homes. The first night there, I lay awake on a narrow bed beside my mother. The shelter was safe, but it was not home. I kept thinking about our old apartment, about my books on the shelf, about the smell of bread when my mother came home from work. Everything was gone, and I felt like part of me had been taken away forever. In the following days, I tried to go back to school, but it was difficult. Some of my classmates had read about us in the newspaper. They whispered behind my back. Some said I was dangerous. Others said I was brave. I did not know what to believe. I walked through the halls with my head low, wishing I could be invisible. The teachers treated me gently, but their eyes were full of worry. I felt like I was no longer Marta, just the girl who stabbed the landlord. My mother started working at a small sewing workshop near the shelter. The pay was little, but it was something. She looked tired all the time, yet she tried to smile at me and act strong. I pretended to be fine too, but at night, when I closed my eyes, I saw Mr. Grayson's face again. I saw the blood, I heard his scream, and I felt my hands shaking. Sometimes I woke up crying, and my mother would hold me until I calmed down. Weeks passed, and one afternoon, a social worker visited the shelter. She asked to speak with us. She said she had read our file and wanted to help. She explained that we might be able to move into a small apartment for women in need. It would not be fancy, but it would be ours. My mother looked at me with tired hope in her eyes. For the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of light inside my chest. When we finally moved into the new apartment, it was small, with only 2 rooms, but it felt like heaven compared to the shelter. My mother and I cleaned it together, scrubbing the walls and sweeping the floor. We had only a few pieces of furniture. But I did not care. It was safe, and no one could come in without our permission. For the first time since that terrible night, I slept without fear, but the scars inside me did not disappear quickly. At school, I kept quiet and stayed away from most people. I thought no one would understand me. Then one day, a girl named Clara came to sit next to me in class. She was new, and she did not seem to know my story. She smiled and asked me if I wanted to study together after school. At first, I wanted to say no. I was afraid she would find out who I was and run away like the others. But something in her smile made me agree. Spending time with Clara reminded me of the part of myself I thought I had lost. She liked books like me. She liked drawing, and sometimes she made little sketches of people in class. She told me about her family, about her little brother, and about her dream to travel one day. Slowly, I began to talk more too. For the first time since the night of the attack, I laughed again. Still, the memory of Mr. Grayson never left me. One day, our lawyer visited us again to tell us the final news about him. He had survived, but he was weak and would not be able to work for a long time. Hearing that gave me mixed feelings. Part of me was glad he was alive because I did not want to be a killer. But another part of me still shook with anger when I remembered his hands on my mother's arm and the way he laughed at her fear. I wondered if he would ever feel sorry for what he did. My mother always told me not to waste my heart on hate. She said we had to move forward, not back. I tried to listen to her, but it was not easy. Every night, I asked myself the same question. If that night came again, what would I do? Would I stay silent, or would I fight again? One evening, while we were having dinner in our small apartment, my mother looked at me and said, "Marta, you must study hard. You must make a future where no one can hurt you or control you. Promise me that you will not let this night be the end of your story. Promise me it will be the beginning." I looked at her, her face lined with exhaustion, yet her eyes shining with strength. In that moment, I understood. The night that changed me did not end my life. It gave me a new path. It showed me how fragile safety is, but also how strong love can be. I promised her that I would work hard, that I would fight not with knives or anger, but with knowledge and courage. That promise stayed in my heart. I still carried the weight of what happened, but I began to believe that I could turn it into something more. The night had changed me, yes, but maybe it had also given me the chance to build a different kind of future. Time passed slowly after that night, but it also moved in strange waves. Some days felt long, filled with heavy thoughts. Other days rushed by when I was busy with school or helping my mother in our small apartment. The truth was that life did not suddenly become easy because the judge let us go, or because we had a new place to live. The memory of Mr. Grayson's face, the blood on my hands, and my mother's scream still followed me. But I started to see that my life did not have to stop there. At school, Clara became my closest friend. She never asked too many questions about my past, but I think she guessed more than she said. One afternoon, when we were sitting under a tree in the schoolyard, she looked at me and said quietly, "You are stronger than you. Think, Marta." Her words stayed with me. I wanted to believe them, but at that time, I still felt broken inside. My mother, Isabel, kept working in the sewing workshop. The pay was low, but she never gave up. She left early in the morning and came back late, her fingers sore from stitching clothes all day. At night, she cooked rice and vegetables, and we ate together at the little wooden table in our kitchen. Sometimes we laughed about silly things, like how the old pipes in the bathroom made strange noises, or how the neighbor's cat always tried to steal our bread. In those moments, I felt hope. But there were other nights when I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, remembering the sound of Mr. Grayson's voice and the weight of the knife in my hand. My heart raced, and I felt guilty all over again. I wondered if he thought of me, if he hated me for what I had done. My mother told me to stop worrying about him, but the memory was stronger than her words. Months later, our lawyer came again. She said Mr. Grayson had moved away to live with a relative in another town. He could not work much, but he had survived. My stomach turned when I heard this, but I also felt relief. He was gone from our city. We would not see him again. That meant safety, but also a reminder that he was still alive somewhere, carrying the mark of that night. With Mr. Grayson gone, my mother tried to push me toward the future. She wanted me to study hard and prepare for the exams that would open doors to college. She said education was the only thing that could give me real freedom. I listened, but it was not easy to concentrate. Every time I picked up my books, my thoughts returned to that night. Still, I tried because I had promised her. Clara helped me. She came to our apartment after school, and we studied together at the table. She made me laugh with her little jokes, and she gave me courage when I wanted to give up. Slowly, I began to feel lighter. I still carried the past, but it no longer felt like a heavy chain around my neck. It felt more like a shadow, always there, but not strong enough to stop me. One Sunday afternoon, our social worker invited us to a community event. It was a gathering of families who had faced hard times like us. There were games for children, food for everyone, and music. I was nervous to go at first, but my mother insisted. At the event, I met other girls my age. Some had escaped violent fathers, others had run from men who wanted to hurt their mothers. Listening to their stories made me realize I was not alone. Many of us had faced fear, and many of us had found ways to keep going. That evening, when we returned home, my mother looked at me and said, "Do you see, Marta? You are not the only one. Pain exists everywhere, but so does courage." Her words gave me strength. I understood that my story was not only about fear and guilt. It was also about survival and about the love between my mother and me. As the months turned into a year, I worked harder at school. I pushed myself, even when I felt tired or when memories haunted me. I wanted to honor my promise to my mother. I wanted to create a future where she would never again have to fear men like Mr. Grayson. When I received my exam results, they were better than I expected. My teachers praised me, and my mother cried with pride. Still, healing was not a straight line. There were days when I walked past a dark alley and froze, my heart pounding, remembering the fear in my mother's eyes. There were nights when I dreamed of blood on my hands, but each time I reminded myself of the judge's words. Violence is never the answer. I could not change the past, but I could decide how to live with it. Clara and I grew closer, and she became like a sister to me. We shared secrets, dreams, and plans for the future. She wanted to study art. I wanted to study law. I wanted to help girls and women who were trapped in situations like mine and my mother's. Maybe one day, I thought, I could stand in court and defend someone like myself. Maybe I could turn my pain into something useful. My mother supported me with all her strength. She saved every little coin she could from her work, and she encouraged me to apply for scholarships. One day, she told me, you will walk into a courtroom not as a frightened girl, but as a strong woman who speaks for others. That will be the day I know everything was worth it. Her faith in me was like a light that guided me forward. 2 years after the night that changed me, we finally left the small apartment the social worker had found for us. With some help from a charity group, we moved into a slightly bigger place. It had 3 rooms and a small balcony where my mother planted flowers in old pots. For the first time, it felt like a real home. The walls were not broken, the roof did not leak, and the air inside smelled of warmth and hope. On our first night there, I stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. My mother was in the kitchen, singing softly as she washed the dishes. The memory of the old apartment, of the fight, of the blood, was still inside me, but it no longer defined me. I was no longer just the girl who stabbed the landlord. I was Marta, a daughter, a student, and a young woman with dreams. Looking back, I realized that the night of the attack had broken something inside me, but it had also built something new. It had forced me to face fear and to choose love over silence. It had shown me that safety is not guaranteed, but courage can make it possible. Most of all, it had reminded me of the unshakable bond between my mother and me. I still do not know what I would do if that night repeated itself. But I know one thing for sure. I will never let fear control me again. I will never stay silent when someone I love is in danger. And one day, when I stand in a courtroom as a lawyer, I will carry with me the memory of that night, not as a weight, but as a fire that pushes me to fight for others. That night changed me forever. It taught me pain, fear, and guilt. But it also taught me love, courage, and the power to begin again. And as long as my mother and I walk side by side, I believe we will always find a way forward. If this story touched you, please share your thoughts in the comments. Do not forget to subscribe for more stories.